Prince Henrik of Denmark was born on June 11, 1934, in Talence, France. He is now most widely remembered for his role as Prince Consort to Queen Margrethe II of Denmark, and for his highly publicized decision in 2017 to refuse burial beside her in the traditional royal tomb at Roskilde Cathedral. Before Prince Henrik became a symbol of royal descent and institutional friction, he was a French aristocrat, shaped by World War II, colonial service, and the demands of European diplomacy. His life story unfolds through his integration into the Danish royal family, his public struggle for recognition, his active participation in diplomacy and cultural affairs, and ultimately his unique challenge to centuries of Danish monarchical tradition. This account traces his origins, the institutional constraints he faced, the personal and public conflicts that defined his career, and the legacy he left both within the Danish monarchy and beyond. Before we begin, please comment where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to know that this story is being watched from all around the globe. Henri de la Borde de Montpezat was born on June 11, 1934, in Talence, France, into an established family with deep aristocratic ties in the Pyrenean region. His father, Count André de la Borde de Montpezat, maintained property and managed agricultural interests near Cahors, and his mother, Renée Yvonne, came from a family with similar local standing. The onset of World War II in Europe disrupted traditional patterns of life, compelling many French families to make decisions dictated by safety and shifting geopolitics. In 1939, as German advances on French territory became imminent, the de la Borde de Montpezat family relocated temporarily to Hanoi in French Indochina, where Count André's business connections provided a measure of stability amid uncertainty. The years spent in Indochina coincided with significant upheavals, including Japanese occupation and the Vichy regime's administrative complications. The family's residence in Hanoi exposed young Henri to an international environment marked by the presence of French colonial officials, local administrators, and an array of expatriates. The educational arrangements during this period reflected both privilege and instability. Henri was tutored privately, with lessons structured to prepare him for eventual reintegration into French academic life upon return. The circumstances demanded adaptability and fostered a degree of cultural awareness unusual for children of the French landed aristocracy at that time. By 1945, with the conclusion of the war in Europe and the surrender of Japan in Asia, the situation in French Indochina grew increasingly precarious. The de la Borde family made arrangements to return to France, re-establishing themselves at their ancestral estate in Cahors. The property, like many in rural France, had experienced the effects of wartime disruption, with labor shortages and damage to infrastructure requiring sustained attention. These experiences during childhood influenced Henri's understanding of transnational identity and the practical realities of estate management in a period of post-war recovery. Upon his return to France, Henri entered formal schooling. He attended several secondary institutions in the Southwest, including the prestigious Jesuit College in Bordeaux. The curriculum emphasized classical languages, French history, and the civic duties expected of members of the regional elite. The post-war era brought changes to educational policy and social attitudes in France, with increased emphasis on meritocratic achievement and civic participation. Henri's academic record was characterized by competence in languages, particularly Latin and Greek, and a growing interest in literature. His exposure to different cultures during formative years was noted in family correspondence, which often referenced his adaptability and multilingual aptitude. Family expectations shaped Henri's future. The de la Borde de Montpezat estate, while extensive by regional standards, did not offer the levels of income or influence once common to French nobility. The family prioritized education and public service as viable routes for the next generation. Henri's parents encouraged his pursuit of higher studies, recognizing that the restoration of family fortunes would likely depend on professional achievement beyond the boundaries of their landholdings. In 1947, the family marked the end of a turbulent period by resuming social and administrative obligations in Cahors, participating in local government and philanthropic activities. The environment into which Henri matured was one of transition for the French aristocracy. National reforms and global shifts following the war meant that land ownership alone no longer guaranteed status or authority. The political climate in France was marked by debates over republicanism, the place of the old nobility, and the colonial future of territories such as Indochina. Family discussions, as recorded in personal diaries and letters, reflected concerns about the sustainability of traditional privileges and the need to adapt to changing economic realities. As Henri reached adolescence, the experience displacement, combined with the expectation of civic duty, framed his ambitions. He participated in local cultural societies and attended regional ceremonies that celebrated French heritage. By the close of the decade, he was preparing for competitive entrance examinations that would determine eligibility for elite universities in Paris. These preparations included summer courses, private tutoring, and extended stays with relatives engaged in public administration. The network of family friends and mentors formed during these years provided connections that would later influence the trajectory of his education and early career. The close of the 1940s found Henri de Laborde de Montpezat positioned at a juncture between inherited tradition and the demands of a new era. The combination of aristocratic lineage, exposure to global affairs, and the imperative for personal achievement defined the parameters of his youth. The return to France after wartime exile and the subsequent adjustment to peacetime society provided the foundation for his later adaptation to diplomatic service and ultimately to his integration into a royal household abroad. The chapter concludes with Henri's transition from regional student to candidate for national academic competitions, a process shaped by the legacies of war, family expectation, and the evolving status of the French aristocracy in the mid-20th century. Henri de Laborde de Montpezat's academic progress accelerated in the late 1940s as he entered the Collège Stanislas in Paris, one of the country's most rigorous preparatory schools. Admission to Stanislas required the successful completion of competitive examinations and was regarded as a pathway to France's Grande École. The family's decision to enroll Henri in Paris reflected both an investment in his future prospects and a recognition that regional connections alone could no longer ensure advancement in post-war France. At Stanislas, Henri pursued a curriculum focused on classical studies, French literature, and modern languages, while also participating in extracurricular activities associated with the civic and cultural renewal underway in the capital. By the early 1950s, Henri had developed particular proficiency in languages including English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, the latter reflecting his childhood in Indochina. He continued his higher education at the Sorbonne, where he read law and political science, and at the Institut National des Langues et Civilisations Orientales, specializing in Chinese and Vietnamese. These studies were informed by the geopolitical context of the era, with France's relationship to its colonies and the international community undergoing rapid transformation. The selection of Asian languages was noted by academic advisors as strategic, given France's ongoing involvement in Southeast Asia and the diplomatic openings expected in the aftermath of decolonization. The requirements of national service were mandatory for young men of Henri's generation. In 1957, he was conscripted into the French army and assigned to the infantry, with initial training at the Saint-Maixent-l'École military academy. The period of service coincided with the intensification of the Algerian War, a conflict that challenged long-standing assumptions about France's global role and placed conscripts in situations of complex political and military significance. Henri's records indicate that he served with distinction, receiving commendations for linguistic skill and adaptability. His familiarity with non-European cultures was utilized in assignments involving liaison with colonial administrators and local officials. The impact of military service on Henri's worldview was considerable. Direct involvement in the operations in North Africa exposed him to the realities of colonial administration, armed conflict, and the ambiguities of post-war French identity. Letters sent to his family during this period reference the difficulties of command, the administrative burdens of counterinsurgency, and the challenges of reconciling personal conviction with state policy. The period also strengthened his sense of duty and fostered a respect for hierarchical institutions, elements that would later feature in his approach to royal protocol and public service. Following the completion of his military obligation, Henri returned to Paris to finalize his academic work. He earned degrees in both law and Oriental studies, qualifications that positioned him well for entry into the French diplomatic service. Career advisors and family contacts recommended the foreign ministry as a suitable avenue for his abilities, and in 1959 he was accepted into the ministry's training program. The decision to pursue a diplomatic career aligned with both family tradition and the changing expectations of the French upper classes, many of whom were increasingly oriented toward government, international organizations, and transnational business. The immediate post-war years in Paris provided opportunities for professional and personal development. Henri's social life included attendance at embassy receptions, participation in literary salons, and involvement in charitable work organized by expatriate and religious communities. The cultural and political climate of the period was defined by the process of reconstruction, re-evaluation of France's role in Europe, and the expansion of global diplomatic networks. Henri's ease in such settings was frequently noted in official reports and by acquaintances, who described him as cosmopolitan and well-prepared for a career requiring adaptability and discretion. The close of the 1950s marked the end of Henri's formal education and military training. The cumulative effect of these experiences, academic achievement in elite Parisian institutions, military service during a period of national crisis, and the cultivation of a cosmopolitan outlook, established the basis for his subsequent professional appointments. The decision to enter the diplomatic service represented both a continuity with family tradition and a response to the new realities of post-war France. It also set the stage for the international assignments that would ultimately lead to his encounter with the Danish royal family and the beginnings of a trajectory that would carry him beyond the confines of the French aristocracy. Henri de Laborde de Montpezat was positioned as a young diplomat of promise, his career grounded in a combination of classical education, military experience, and international perspective. The transition from student and soldier to government official marked a decisive shift in his circumstances, foreshadowing the series of professional and personal developments that would define the next stage of his life. In 1959, Henri de Laborde de Montpezat was formally inducted into the French Foreign Ministry. His earliest assignments were in the Protocol Division, a department responsible for the planning and execution of state visits, ceremonial functions, and liaison with foreign delegations. The post required precision, discretion, and fluency in multiple languages, qualities that Henri had developed over a decade of rigorous academic and military preparation. Early evaluations by senior ministry officials noted his facility with cross-cultural interaction and his composure in formal settings. By 1961, Henri was selected for a posting at the French Embassy in London, a highly regarded diplomatic station central to post-war Franco-British relations. The embassy, located in Knightsbridge, served as the principal site for bilateral negotiations, cultural exchange, and the management of diplomatic crises. Henri's responsibilities included preparing briefings for senior diplomats, managing visits by French ministers, and representing the embassy at events attended by British officials and members of the Commonwealth. The position also required regular attendance at social gatherings hosted by the British aristocracy and foreign embassies, events at which matters of protocol and etiquette were closely observed. The period in London exposed Henri to the dynamics of European diplomacy at a time when the continent was grappling with questions of integration, economic recovery, and decolonization. The early 1960s saw the United Kingdom negotiating entry into the European Economic Community, and France redefining its role in NATO and global affairs. Henri's work often intersected with these larger developments as he drafted correspondence, prepared policy summaries, and participated in informal negotiations on trade and cultural matters. His ability to navigate the complexities of British society was enhanced by his command of English and familiarity with French expatriate communities, artists, and business leaders resident in London. Outside the confines of the embassy, Henri developed a routine that included participation in cultural societies, attendance at classical concerts and art exhibitions, and the maintenance of correspondence with family and friends in France. The network of acquaintances he formed included journalists, academics, and minor royals, reflecting the social fluidity of London's international circles. Embassy records from this era document his attendance at numerous formal dinners and receptions, where he represented French interests while also building a reputation for courtesy and cultural sophistication. Professional evaluations in the mid-1960s identified Henri as a candidate for further advancement within the ministry. His superiors noted his success in managing several sensitive issues, including the coordination of French participation in British commemorative events and the handling of protocol during official visits by French dignitaries. His reports were described as accurate and balanced, and he was frequently consulted for his opinions on matters of ceremonial precedence and diplomatic practice. By 1965, Henri's career trajectory appeared set. He had received offers to transfer to other major European capitals, and discussions were underway regarding possible appointments to posts in Asia or North America. However, it was in London that a personal development would alter the course of his life. Regular invitations to events attended by members of the British and Scandinavian royal families increased the likelihood of encounters that combined professional duty with the traditions of European aristocracy. Diplomatic society in London was noted for its permeability between official and social domains, a circumstance that played a decisive role in the next phase of Henri's career. Throughout his service, Henri maintained his interest in languages and international affairs. He continued studies in Asian languages, attended lectures on colonial transitions, and read widely in contemporary European history and political thought. His correspondence from this period, preserved in family archives, records reflections on the changes underway in European society, the future of the French aristocracy, and the challenges of adapting tradition to modern institutions. The culmination of Henri's diplomatic assignment in London was not marked by a formal promotion, but by his introduction to Crown Princess Margrethe of Denmark at a dinner hosted by mutual acquaintances in 1966. The event, arranged in accordance with embassy protocol, brought together diplomats, minor royals, and representatives of cultural organizations. The meeting occurred in a context shaped by mutual interests in European affairs, shared linguistic abilities, and the traditions of continental aristocracy. The conclusion of Henri's assignment in London coincided with the opening of negotiations surrounding his future relationship with the Danish royal family. Professional recommendations from the French Foreign Ministry characterized him as a candidate for further advancement, but also acknowledged the significance of his personal affiliations and the implications for both French and Danish institutions. The next stage of his life would move beyond the framework of diplomatic service and into the orbit of European royalty, setting the conditions for his transformation from a French aristocrat and civil servant to Prince Consort of Denmark. The marriage of Henri de la Borde de Montpezat to Crown Princess Margrethe of Denmark was scheduled for June 10, 1967, in Copenhagen, following several months of intensive planning by the Danish royal household, government officials, and representatives from France. Preparations for the event entailed not only ceremonial arrangements but also legal, religious, and diplomatic formalities that reflected the unique circumstances of an international royal union. The Danish State Church, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were closely involved in drafting documents that confirmed Henri's new status and finalized his transition from French citizen and Catholic diplomat to Danish prince and member of the evangelical Lutheran faith. The wedding ceremony took place at Holman's Church, a site of historic significance for the Danish monarchy, and was attended by reigning and former monarchs from across Europe, government ministers, foreign dignitaries, and hundreds of invited guests. The event was broadcast on national and international radio and television, ensuring that the proceedings were closely followed by audiences throughout Denmark and abroad. Newspaper coverage detailed every aspect, from Margrethe's bridal attire and procession through the streets of Copenhagen to the present French officials who witnessed the formal completion of Henri's naturalization. Henri was officially granted the title of His Royal Highness Prince Henrik of Denmark on the morning of the wedding. By order of King Frederik IX, the royal proclamation recorded in the Danish Government Gazette made explicit reference to his renunciation of French citizenship, his completed conversion to the Lutheran Church, and the affirmation of his legal and ceremonial duties as Prince Consort. In accordance with Danish tradition, his new name and title were incorporated into the official royal roster, and he was presented with insignia of several Danish orders, including the Order of the Elephant. Following the ceremony, the couple participated in a series of formal celebrations, beginning with a reception at Amalienborg Palace. The guest list included members of the Danish Parliament, senior officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, representatives of the armed forces, and delegations from the major cities of Denmark. Protocol dictated the order of greetings and the structure of the evening's toasts, which included messages of goodwill from foreign governments and the reading of congratulatory telegrams from heads of state. Photographs and film footage from the event became fixtures in Danish archives and public memory, symbolizing both continuity and renewal within the monarchy. The period after the wedding was characterized by a combination of public engagements and private adaptation. Prince Henrik was introduced to his new official residence at Amalienborg and briefed on royal duties by experienced courtiers. The Danish press covered his participation in charity events, meetings with municipal authorities, and visits to institutions such as the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts. His initial efforts to learn Danish and familiarize himself with local customs were noted with interest by journalists, and early interviews documented both his ambitions for the role and his awareness of the challenges involved. In France, the marriage was interpreted as a sign of strengthened ties with Denmark and a mark of distinction for the de la Borde de Montpezat family. Several French periodicals published profiles of the new prince, emphasizing his education, military service, and reputation as a cultured European. The diplomatic community viewed the union as an example of the evolving relationship between traditional European institutions and the modern world, with particular attention paid to the processes by which Henri had fulfilled religious and national requirements for the marriage. From a legal perspective, Prince Henrik's position was defined by both Danish and international precedents regarding royal consorts. Danish statutes provided a framework for his rights and obligations, though the exact nature of his status, especially regarding succession and participation in state affairs, remained a subject of discussion among constitutional scholars. Protocol offices in both Copenhagen and Paris maintained records of the agreements reached prior to the wedding, which included stipulations about language, travel, and participation in official functions. The marriage concluded a period of significant transition for Henri, involving the abandonment of his career in the French diplomatic service, the adoption of a new faith, and the assumption of a public identity shaped by the expectations of the Danish people and the traditions of the monarchy. The successful orchestration of the wedding and the peaceful integration of a foreign-born consort were regarded by many observers as evidence of Denmark's capacity for institutional flexibility and adaptation. The events of 1967 thus marked the definitive beginning of Prince Henrik's role in Danish public life and set the trajectory for the challenges and contributions that would define his decades as Prince Consort. The introduction of Henri de la Borde de Montpezat to Crown Princess Margrethe of Denmark in early 1966 was facilitated by mutual acquaintances within London's diplomatic and aristocratic circles. The dinner at which they met was organized at a private residence, attended by a select group of officials, members of European royalty, and cultural figures associated with the British and Scandinavian embassies. The event's guest list was curated to encourage connections among the continent's younger aristocrats and diplomats, an approach in line with established social strategies of the period. At the time of their meeting, Margrethe was heir presumptive to the Danish throne, her status confirmed by constitutional amendments in Denmark in 1953 that permitted female succession. Her international education included studies at the University of Cambridge, the Sorbonne, and the London School of Economics, and she was regarded by contemporaries as intellectually accomplished and conversant in several languages. Henri's background as a French aristocrat with diplomatic credentials matched the expectations for a consort, particularly given the close cultural and political ties between Denmark and France during this period. Initial conversations between Henri and Margrethe reportedly centered on literature, art, and recent developments in European politics. The affinity for languages shared by both figures, as well as similar experiences in academic and diplomatic environments, laid the foundation for further interaction. Within weeks, they attended additional gatherings together, including embassy receptions, gallery openings, and cultural lectures. These meetings, while social in nature, occurred with the awareness and tacit approval of their respective families and advisors. The possibility of a formal relationship quickly became a subject of consideration for both royal and diplomatic institutions. The Danish royal household began confidential inquiries into Henri's background, assessing his suitability based on lineage, religion, and personal reputation. The French Foreign Ministry was informed of the development, recognizing that a marriage between a French diplomat and a Danish princess would necessitate procedural adjustments, particularly regarding Henri's nationality and official duties. One of the primary challenges concerned religious affiliation. The Danish monarchy, as stipulated by the country's constitution, required that members of the royal family belong to the Evangelical Lutheran Church. Henri, raised in the Catholic tradition, was approached regarding his willingness to convert. After consultation with family and ecclesiastical authorities, he agreed to undertake religious instruction and subsequently joined the Danish state church, a process completed in the months leading to the engagement announcement. Another matter involved citizenship and the protocols of succession. Henri was required to relinquish his French citizenship and apply for naturalization as a Danish subject, a process handled expeditiously by both governments. The formalities were completed in accordance with Danish law, and official notifications were transmitted through diplomatic channels in late 1966. These actions were recorded in state archives and referenced in official biographies compiled in subsequent years. The engagement was publicly announced on October 5, 1966, during a press conference at Fredensborg Palace, attended by members of both families and representatives of the international media. Statements released by the Danish court emphasized the couple's shared values, educational background, and commitment to public service. French officials issued parallel communications, framing the engagement as a symbol of continuing Franco-Danish friendship and cooperation. Reactions in Denmark were largely favorable, though some commentary in the press highlighted the novelty of a foreign-born consort and speculated about the implications for the monarchy's traditions. Coverage in France focused on Henri's transition from diplomatic service to royal responsibilities, with profiles emphasizing his education, cultural interests, and family heritage. Royal watchers across Europe noted the union as part of a broader trend toward international marriages among the continent's reigning families during the post-war era. Arrangements for the wedding began soon after the announcement, involving detailed coordination between the Danish and French authorities, the Lutheran and Catholic churches, and the royal households of multiple European nations. The months leading to the wedding were marked by a series of official and private meetings designed to formalize the couple's engagement, resolve outstanding legal and religious matters, and prepare for the transfer of roles and responsibilities that would follow marriage. By the end of 1966, Henri de Laborde de Montpezat had concluded his diplomatic duties and relocated to Denmark in preparation for the wedding. The transition required adjustment to new protocols, cultural expectations, and public scrutiny. The developments of this period established the foundation for his subsequent role as Prince Consort, initiating a trajectory that would place him at the intersection of two royal traditions and set the stage for the further integration of continental European aristocracy into the institutional framework of the Danish monarchy. In the months following the royal wedding, Prince Henrik began the complex process of acclimating to life in Denmark and fulfilling his new role as Prince Consort. Although his transition was carefully managed by the Danish royal household and assisted by experienced staff, the practical realities of daily life introduced new demands. Early public appearances focused on official receptions, ceremonial openings, and participation in state-sponsored cultural events. These duties were intended to familiarize Prince Henrik with the expectations of Danish society and demonstrate his commitment to his adopted country. The learning of the Danish language, was regarded as a priority by both the royal family and the public. Prince Henrik took lessons with private tutors and was reported to practice diligently. Though his French accent and occasional linguistic errors were frequently noted by the press, public interest in his efforts to master Danish became a recurring theme in media coverage. While some journalists framed these efforts as evidence of goodwill, others interpreted persistent linguistic differences as symbolic of cultural distance between the prince and the broader population. The integration process extended beyond language and ceremony. Prince Henrik was tasked with developing an understanding of Danish political institutions, local government, and the social landscape. He met regularly with government ministers, municipal leaders, and representatives of trade and cultural organizations. These encounters introduced him to the structures that shaped Danish society in the late 1960s. Although his diplomatic background offered a foundation for these interactions, the specific expectations placed on a royal consort required further adaptation. Public perception of Prince Henrik was shaped by both his own actions and by existing attitudes toward foreign-born members of the monarchy. Initial enthusiasm following the wedding was tempered by skepticism among segments of the public and press who regarded his aristocratic background and cosmopolitan manner as potential sources of friction within Denmark's more egalitarian tradition. Opinion columns and letters to newspapers debated the appropriateness of foreign influence in royal affairs and scrutinized Henrik's conduct at public events. Within the royal household, Prince Henrik's role was officially secondary to that of Crown Princess Margrethe. His status as Prince Consort did not include constitutional authority or a clear succession pathway. Court documents and official biographies from this period emphasize his supportive functions, accompanying Margrethe to state occasions, representing the monarchy at public functions, and engaging in charitable activity. Administrative records detail his patronage of newly assigned foundations and his involvement in fundraising initiatives for the arts and social welfare. Prince Henrik's efforts to define his identity within the constraints of tradition were complicated by the informal yet powerful expectations attached to the role of consort. Private correspondence from royal advisors reveals ongoing discussions about his place in ceremonial protocol, the division of responsibilities, and his participation in family events. Notably, records indicate repeated consultations with Danish officials regarding appropriate modes of dress, forms of address, and the distribution of speaking roles at public engagements. The late 1960s were also marked by the couple's adjustment to married life under intense public observation. Photographs from this period frequently show Prince Henrik and Crown Princess Margrethe attending social functions, touring cultural sites, and greeting crowds during provincial visits. While such appearances were intended to convey unity and accessibility, behind the scenes they involved significant logistical planning and coordination between palace staff and local authorities. The official calendar, archived by the royal household, records dozens of engagements in the first years of marriage, from state dinners to exhibitions and inaugurations. Despite the challenges, Prince Henrik initiated efforts to establish independent areas of activity within Danish society. He expressed interest in cultural and artistic affairs, supporting literary awards and music festivals, and became involved in initiatives aimed at strengthening Franco-Danish relations. Contemporary press accounts mention his participation in French language events and his advocacy for educational exchanges. These efforts, while modest in scope, contributed to a gradual evolution of his public image from outsider to active participant in Danish national life. By the early 1970s, Prince Henrik had acquired basic fluency in Danish, expanded his network of contacts in government and culture, and developed a routine that balanced ceremonial obligations with private interests. The cumulative effect of these years was to establish a baseline of acceptance within the royal family and among sections of the public, even as questions about his role and identity continued to surface. This period of adaptation, marked by negotiation and incremental change, concluded with a pivotal transition in the Danish monarchy, setting the stage for a new chapter in Prince Henrik's official responsibilities and public visibility. On January 14, 1972, the Danish monarchy underwent significant transition with the death of King Frederik IX. The passing of the monarch initiated established constitutional procedures for the proclamation of Crown Princess Margrethe as Denmark's new sovereign. The ceremony was conducted at Christiansborg Palace, attended by members of the royal family, government ministers, and representatives of the Danish parliament, the Folketing. The accession was publicly announced by Prime Minister Jens Otto Krag from the balcony, in accordance with Danish tradition, formally recognizing Margrethe II as queen. With the ascension of Margrethe II, Prince Henrik's status as consort became more prominent but remained undefined by Danish constitutional law. The Danish monarchy, while long accustomed to queen's consort, had not previously established clear guidelines for the role of a male consort. Unlike the consorts of reigning kings, whose positions and prerogatives were rooted in tradition, the role of prince consort was subject to interpretation by the court, the government, and the public. Protocol dictated that Prince Henrik would support the queen at official functions, accompany her on state visits, and assume ceremonial responsibilities. Yet no legislation or formal agreement delineated the scope or authority of his role. Records from the Danish royal household indicate that the transition was handled with careful attention to ceremonial protocol and public communication. Prince Henrik participated in the period of national mourning and attended a series of memorial services and public audiences with Queen Margrethe II. His visibility increased as he accompanied the new monarch to regional ceremonies, military reviews, and international diplomatic engagements. Press coverage from the period frequently highlighted the visual symbolism of the new royal couple, noting Prince Henrik's presence at the Queen's side as Denmark navigated the transition. The change in monarchy brought with it new patterns of work for Prince Henrik. He attended briefings with court officials and senior advisors to the Queen, discussing schedules for public appearances, state visits, and the administration of royal patronages. These responsibilities were recorded in palace calendars and official correspondence. Although he was granted precedence as consort, Prince Henrik did not assume any direct political function, and his involvement in state affairs remained strictly limited to ceremonial representation. Danish legal scholars and royal commentators debated the implications of this arrangement, noting that it placed him in a position of visibility without the authority historically attached to the role of king. During the initial months of Margrethe's reign, the Danish royal family undertook a series of public engagements designed to reinforce the monarchy's continuity and public support. Prince Henrik's participation in these events was documented in both state media and independent press. He accompanied the Queen to official receptions, toured industrial and agricultural sites, and represented the monarchy at charitable fundraisers. Reports from the period emphasize his growing familiarity with Danish protocol and his willingness to engage with local communities. Despite these contributions, Prince Henrik's position as consort remained a subject of public and private uncertainty. Letters from court officials and entries in contemporary diaries record his ongoing efforts to clarify his role, both within the royal household and in communication with the government. Informal discussions among senior officials occasionally reference the possibility of modifying ceremonial practices to better reflect his new status. But no substantive changes were introduced during the first years of Margrethe II's reign. The absence of a defined constitutional role created ambiguities that would persist for decades. Internationally, Prince Henrik's activities as consort helped to maintain Denmark's profile among European monarchies and in diplomatic circles. He joined the Queen on state visits to neighboring countries, attended royal weddings and funerals abroad, and hosted foreign dignitaries at Danish palaces. These events were covered in foreign media, which frequently commented on the challenges faced by royal consorts in modern constitutional monarchies. Comparisons were drawn with consorts in other European states, highlighting the variations in protocol and the ongoing evolution of royal roles. As Denmark adjusted to the reign of Margrethe, Prince Henrik's day-to-day life reflected a combination of public duty and private negotiation. The demands of ceremonial life, the expectations of the Danish public, and the absence of formal authority combined to shape a period marked by adaptation and ongoing debate. The years following the accession of the Queen thus established the contours of Prince Henrik's role in Danish public life and set the conditions for the future challenges that would define his tenure as Prince Consort. The establishment of a royal household with the births of Crown Prince Frederik in 1968 and Prince Joachim in 1969 added new dimensions to Prince Henrik's responsibilities and to the Danish monarchy's public image. The arrival of heirs secured the immediate succession, which was a matter of national significance and brought heightened attention to the family's domestic life. Danish newspapers and international outlets covered the births in detail, publishing official statements from the royal court and noting the traditions observed in naming and baptismal ceremonies. These events were orchestrated with the participation of government representatives, members of the Danish state church, and selected European royals, reinforcing the monarchy's ties to both national and continental traditions. Prince Henrik's involvement in his son's upbringing reflected evolving expectations about the role of fathers and royal consorts in European monarchies during the late 20th century. Court records and family biographies describe his active participation in the early care and education of Frederik and Joachim, including the organization of tutors, selection of schools, and the arrangement of family routines at Amalienborg Palace and the royal family's summer residence at Gråsten. While the day-to-day management of the household remained under the direction of experienced staff, Henrik's influence in shaping educational priorities and fostering bilingualism was noted in correspondence with advisors and in interviews with the Danish press. The early 1970s also saw the royal family increase its presence at public and ceremonial functions intended to showcase the monarchy's accessibility and modernity. The participation of Crown Princess Margrethe and Prince Henrik in children's charities, educational initiatives, and civic events became a regular feature of the royal calendar. Photographs and film footage from these engagements were circulated widely in Denmark, serving to humanize the royal household and demonstrate its integration into the life of the nation. Official documentation from the period reveals a deliberate strategy by the royal court to emphasize family values and civic responsibility, themes that resonated with both domestic and international audiences. Despite the outward appearance of stability, the internal dynamics of the royal household were shaped by the continued ambiguity of Prince Henrik's status and the adjustments required in balancing personal and official roles. Private correspondence between palace officials and royal advisors contains references to disagreements over protocol, the allocation of time between public duties and private family life, and the management of competing expectations from the Danish public and media. These discussions, while conducted discreetly, highlight the practical challenges faced by Prince Henrik as he navigated the intersection of dynastic obligation and individual identity. The family maintained a regular schedule of travel between Denmark and the French estate of Château de Cayx, which had been acquired by Prince Henrik in 1974. The estate, located in the Cahors wine region, served as both a private retreat and a venue for informal diplomatic exchanges. Official itineraries and personal letters indicate that time spent in France offered opportunities for the royal children to experience bilingual education and exposure to continental European culture. The management of the estate, including the production of wine and the hosting of international guests, became an important aspect of Henrik's personal and professional life, documented in royal archives and contemporary press profiles. The visibility of the royal family during this period contributed to a gradual shift in public perceptions of the monarchy. Surveys and opinion polls conducted in Denmark in the 1970s and early 1980s reveal increasing approval ratings for the royal household, with particular emphasis placed on its perceived modernity, openness, and commitment to civic engagement. The activities of Prince Henrik in educational, cultural, and charitable spheres were highlighted in official reports as evidence of the monarchy's adaptability to changing social norms. By the end of the 1970s, the royal household had established a pattern of balancing public duty and private life that would define its operations for decades to come. The upbringing of Crown Prince Frederik and Prince Joachim, the cultivation of international and bilingual experiences, and the emphasis on modern family values all contributed to the evolving image of the Danish monarchy. For Prince Henrik, the responsibilities of fatherhood and consortship were inextricably linked to the broader challenges and opportunities presented by a rapidly changing society and an institution in transition. During the 1970 and 1980, Prince Henrik expanded his profile in Denmark through a series of public service initiatives and independent pursuits that reflected both the evolving role of royal consorts in Europe and his own personal interests. While maintaining his ceremonial responsibilities at the side of Queen Margrethe II, he sought to define areas of engagement that would allow him to contribute meaningfully to Danish society and to carve out a distinct identity within the royal institution. Official records from the Danish royal court detail his involvement with foundations such as the Danish Poetry Society and the Danish French Society, organizations that promoted literary exchange, cultural events, and language education. Prince Henrik also presided over awards ceremonies, participated in the inauguration of public art installations, and regularly attended concerts, exhibitions, and theatrical performances. These activities positioned him as a visible figure in Denmark's cultural life and were documented extensively in royal calendars and the press. A central element of Prince Henrik's independent interests was the promotion of Franco-Danish relations. Leveraging his bilingual background and connections to France, he organized cultural exchanges, scholarship programs, and joint events that aimed to deepen understanding between the two countries. He frequently hosted French dignitaries at official receptions, and the annual celebration of Bastille Day at Danish palaces became a fixture in the diplomatic calendar. The maintenance of these ties was supported by both the French embassy in Copenhagen and the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which viewed such efforts as complementary to formal diplomatic relations. Prince Henrik also pursued literary endeavors, publishing his first collection of poetry, Chemin Faisant, in 1982. The book, written in French and later translated into Danish, was well received in literary circles and reviewed in major newspapers. This foray into literature was followed by additional works, including essays and a memoir. His writings often explored themes of identity, migration, and the interplay between tradition and modernity, subjects directly informed by his own experience as a French-born consort in Denmark. The publication of these works contributed to an evolving public image, adding a layer of intellectual engagement to his official persona. Charitable activity formed another key component of Prince Henrik's public service during these years. He accepted honorary positions in organizations addressing health, disability, and child welfare, and was instrumental in the establishment of several fundraising events and awareness campaigns. Financial records and minutes from foundation meetings demonstrate his regular attendance, public remarks, and oversight of grant disbursements. In interviews, beneficiaries and organizational leaders described his involvement as sincere and persistent, noting that his presence attracted media attention and facilitated corporate sponsorship. Despite these contributions, Prince Henrik's efforts were often interpreted through the lens of his ongoing search for a clearly defined role within the Danish monarchy. Commentary in the press and in official communications from the royal household sometimes pointed to the challenges he faced in gaining full public acceptance, especially when contrasted with the long-standing Danish traditions of modesty and reserve. However, Supporters within cultural and diplomatic sectors consistently praised his commitment to service and his willingness to invest in new areas of royal engagement. The management and development of the family's French estate, Château de Caux, was another enduring interest. In addition to functioning as a private residence, the estate became known for its vineyard and wine production, both of which Prince Henrik actively promoted. The wine was marketed in Denmark, and profits from selected vintages were donated to charitable causes, a practice documented in business records and philanthropic reports. The operation of the estate, including its hosting of international guests and use as a venue for Franco-Danish events, was covered in the Danish and French media, further reinforcing the prince's cross-cultural identity. By the close of the 1980s, Prince Henrik had established a reputation as a royal consort with independent interests, recognized for his cultural advocacy, charitable work, and literary output. The cumulative effect of these initiatives contributed to the monarchy's modernization and enhanced its relevance in contemporary Danish society. At the same time, the pursuit of these activities highlighted persistent questions regarding the evolving definition of royal roles and the integration of foreign-born figures into the fabric of a national institution. The experiences of this period set the stage for the more explicit debates and public challenges that would shape Prince Henrik's subsequent decades in Denmark. As Prince Henrik's public service and personal interests expanded, so too did debates over his official status within the Danish monarchy. The 1980s and 1990s were characterized by both public and private efforts to clarify the consort's role, an endeavor complicated by legal tradition, institutional precedent, and evolving social attitudes toward the royal family. At the center of this debate was the persistent question of whether a male consort should enjoy status and privileges equal to those historically afforded to Queen's consort, and if not, what the implications would be for the monarchy's long-term stability and modernization. During this period, Prince Henrik gave several candid interviews in which he addressed his frustrations with the lack of parity. He observed that although he held the formal title of Prince Consort, he was neither king nor granted any constitutional authority, nor included in the succession to the throne. Danish law, unlike that of certain other European monarchies, did not provide for the possibility of a reigning queen's husband to assume the title of king. In interviews with Danish and foreign journalists, Henrik spoke openly of the symbolic and practical limitations of his position, emphasizing his desire for recognition equivalent to that enjoyed by female consorts. Court records and correspondence between royal advisors reflect ongoing discussions regarding ceremonial protocol and the order of precedence at public events. Prince Henrik's position was consistently subordinate to the Queen, and in certain situations, even to his own son, Crown Prince Frederik. This order, enshrined in official manuals and enforced at state functions, was perceived by the prince and his supporters as diminishing his dignity and status. Attempts to adjust protocol, including the consideration of a more prominent ceremonial role or additional honorary titles, were documented in internal memos, but ultimately met resistance from tradition-minded officials and segments of the Danish public. The subject attracted significant media coverage, particularly during occasions when Prince Henrik's dissatisfaction manifested in changes to his public behavior. Notably, in the mid-1990s, he declined to participate in certain royal events or temporarily withdrew from public duties in protest. Each such episode was closely analyzed by journalists, opinion columnists, and historians, some of whom framed the debate as evidence of an outdated monarchy struggling to adapt to contemporary gender roles and the expectations of a modern European society. Supporters of Prince Henrik pointed to his record of service, cultural contributions, and commitment to Denmark as grounds for reconsidering his status, while critics cited the risks of undermining established constitutional principles. The Danish government maintained a neutral public stance, reiterating that the definition of royal roles was a matter for the royal household, and the constitution, not for legislative intervention. However, parliamentary records indicate that individual members occasionally raised questions about the treatment of Prince Henrik during debates on related matters, such as state funding for the monarchy and the regulation of royal titles. No formal motions or legislative proposals regarding his status were advanced during this period. Privately, correspondence between Prince Henrik and Queen Margrethe II, as well as with close friends and advisors, reveals the degree to which the status debate shaped his personal and professional outlook. Letters and diary entries reference his feelings of isolation and his ongoing attempts to balance personal conviction with the demands of public life. At the same time, records show that the Queen provided consistent support, both privately and in public statements, emphasizing his contributions and the importance of his partnership in the success of the monarchy. The 1980s and 1990s, thus, became a period of both assertion and frustration for Prince Henrik. His public advocacy for recognition, coupled with his visible commitment to cultural and charitable activities, fueled an evolving debate about the place of royal consorts in Denmark's constitutional monarchy. Although the status quo remained largely unchanged, the controversies of these years helped to lay the groundwork for future discussions about gender, equality, and modernization within the institution. The cumulative effect was to reinforce Prince Henrik's legacy as a catalyst for debate and change, setting the context for the subsequent decades of royal service and adaptation. In parallel with his ongoing public duties and the unresolved status debate, Prince Henrik continued to cultivate a wide array of personal and literary interests throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and into the early 2000s. This era saw the consolidation of his reputation as a man of letters and a champion of Franco-Danish cultural exchange. It also reflected his intention to assert a personal identity independent of official royal protocol, establishing a legacy built not only on ceremonial presence, but also on intellectual and creative achievement. Prince Henrik's literary output increased steadily, beginning with the publication of his poetry collection Chemin Faisant in 1982. The volume, composed in French and subsequently translated into Danish, attracted attention in Denmark's literary community and was reviewed in both domestic and international press. The work was notable for its introspective tone and themes of displacement and belonging, which were interpreted by some critics as reflections of his own experience navigating the complexities of identity as a foreign-born royal consort. Over the next 2 decades, Henrik published further collections including Cantabile in 2000, as well as a memoir that detailed his upbringing, diplomatic service, and transition into royal life. His participation in literary and artistic circles extended beyond writing. Henrik regularly attended book launches, literary award ceremonies, and art exhibitions, often serving as a patron or honorary guest. He was a frequent presence at the annual Bog Forum Book Fair in Copenhagen and sponsored prizes for young writers. Through these activities, he forged connections with authors, translators, and academics, supporting efforts to promote Danish literature abroad and French literary traditions within Denmark. Archival documentation and correspondence reveal ongoing collaboration with cultural organizations such as the Danish Writers Association and the Institut Français, as well as sponsorship of exchange programs for students and emerging artists. A significant personal project during this period was the ongoing development of Château de Cayx, the family estate in the Lot region of France. Purchased in 1974, the estate became a center for viticulture, hosting annual harvest festivals, tastings, and educational tours. Prince Henrik managed the vineyard operations directly, working with French enologists and Danish distributors to market the wines in both countries. Profits from special bottlings were directed to charities in Denmark and France, a practice documented in business records and highlighted in press coverage. The chateau also functioned as a setting for private family gatherings and informal diplomatic events, strengthening the prince's reputation as a cultural bridge between Denmark and his homeland. Throughout these decades, Prince Henrik maintained active involvement in culinary and gastronomic societies. He participated in the Danish Gastronomic Academy, presided over culinary competitions, and was awarded honorary memberships in French and Danish chef associations. Media reports from the time often referenced his passion for food and wine, featuring interviews in which he shared recipes and discussed the importance of culinary heritage. These activities were recognized as part of his broader efforts to elevate Franco-Danish cultural connections. Personal correspondence and diaries from this period, later made public through authorized biographies, reveal a sustained effort to find meaning and fulfillment outside the constraints of official duty. Prince Henrik reflected candidly on the challenges of adapting to Danish life, the responsibilities of fatherhood, and the pursuit of creative satisfaction. He frequently described writing, viticulture, and culinary arts as sources of both personal solace and public contribution. The expansion of Henrik's personal and literary pursuits did not diminish his royal obligations. He continued to attend state functions, accompany Queen Margrethe II on official visits, and support the education of Crown Prince Frederik and Prince Joachim. Rather, these pursuits were integrated into his public image, providing the Danish monarchy with a visible link to contemporary culture and cross-national dialogue. By the early 2000s, Prince Henrik's reputation as a poet, winemaker, and patron of the arts was firmly established, further distinguishing his legacy within the Danish royal family and among European consorts. This period underscored the possibility of a royal consort shaping a distinctive role in a constitutional monarchy, one that combined ceremonial responsibility with a persistent commitment to independent interests and cultural engagement. The cumulative impact of these pursuits was to reinforce the modernization of the Danish monarchy and to anchor Prince Henrik's legacy in both institutional and personal accomplishment. From the early 1970s through the first decade of the new century, Prince Henrik was a central figure in Denmark's program of international engagement. Drawing on his previous diplomatic service and multilingual background, he was frequently selected to accompany Queen Margrethe II on state visits and to represent the Danish monarchy at international functions. This period marked the expansion of Denmark's global relationships, both within Europe and further afield, and the prince's skills in protocol, language, and cultural mediation were recognized as valuable assets by the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the royal court. Official records and royal travel logs document Prince Henrik's participation in dozens of state visits across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. These engagements involved formal meetings with heads of state, participation in national ceremonies, attendance at banquets, and the exchange of official gifts. The prince's ability to communicate fluently in French, English, and Danish allowed him to interact effectively with international dignitaries and to facilitate dialogue on behalf of the Queen. Internal memoranda from the Foreign Ministry noted his role in smoothing logistical complications, handling delicate social interactions, and fostering goodwill during occasions where language barriers or cultural misunderstandings threatened the success of diplomatic efforts. In addition to supporting Denmark's bilateral relationships, Prince Henrik played a visible part in multilateral organizations and events. He represented the Danish monarchy at United Nations sessions, international expositions, and commemorations marking European integration and peace initiatives. In these settings, he frequently delivered remarks on behalf of the Queen, emphasizing Denmark's commitment to international cooperation, human rights, and cultural exchange. Documentation of these speeches in government archives reflects careful coordination between royal advisors and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, underscoring the ceremonial but also substantive nature of his contributions. Prince Henrik also took a particular interest in promoting Franco-Danish relations, serving as an unofficial ambassador between the two countries. He worked with the French embassy in Copenhagen and the Danish embassy in Paris to arrange state visits, student exchanges, and joint cultural projects. Notably, his personal connections in French political, business, and cultural circles enabled Denmark to cultivate partnerships beyond the scope of formal diplomacy. Press coverage in both Denmark and France often highlighted the prince's dual identity as a source of strength for the monarchy's international image. Within Denmark, Prince Henrik's diplomatic activities were sometimes the subject of debate, with critics questioning the necessity and expense of royal travel. However, official reports and parliamentary briefings routinely concluded that the monarchy's presence at international events enhanced Denmark's prestige and visibility. Business delegations and government officials who accompanied the royal couple on overseas visits credited these missions with facilitating trade agreements, scientific cooperation, and the promotion of Danish industry and tourism. Prince Henrik's engagement was not confined to high-level statecraft. He also represented the royal family at smaller-scale cultural exchanges, including museum openings, academic conferences, and arts festivals abroad. These appearances, documented in the records of cultural ministries and arts organizations, provided platforms for Danish artists, scholars, and entrepreneurs to gain international exposure. The prince's personal interest in literature, wine, and cuisine often informed the themes of these events, further reinforcing his role as a cultural ambassador. Throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, Prince Henrik was also a regular participant at royal weddings, funerals, and national commemorations across Europe. Such occasions, while largely ceremonial, played a significant part in maintaining the informal network of relationships that connected Europe's remaining monarchies. Archival correspondence between royal households attests to the careful coordination involved and the importance placed on these appearances for continuity and solidarity within the broader royal community. By the end of the 2000s, Prince Henrik's record of international representation was firmly established. His efforts complemented the Queen's and reinforced Denmark's reputation as an engaged and outward-looking constitutional monarchy. The breadth and consistency of his diplomatic activity not only benefited Denmark's foreign relations, but also provided further evidence of the evolving and professionalized role of the royal consort in the modern era. The cumulative effect was to reinforce Prince Henrik's legacy as a key figure in the monarchy's adaptation to the demands and opportunities of global diplomacy. In the early 2000s, long-standing questions regarding Prince Henrik's precedence within the Danish royal household culminated in a highly publicized episode that came to be known as the precedence crisis. The incident originated during the annual New Year's levee at Amalienborg Palace in January 2002, a traditional event attended by government officials, foreign diplomats, and members of the royal family. According to established protocol, the order of procession and seating placed Queen Margrethe II at the forefront, followed by Crown Prince Frederik, with Prince Henrik assigned a position after their son. This arrangement, consistent with Danish royal tradition, triggered dissatisfaction on the part of the prince, who interpreted the order as a sign of diminished respect for his status as consort. Official court records and contemporaneous news reports document Prince Henrik's reaction to the perceived slight. Following the event, he chose to leave Denmark and reside temporarily at Château de Quay, the family estate in France. His absence was confirmed by the Royal Press Office, which issued statements characterizing the decision as a personal matter. The departure quickly attracted widespread media attention, generating debate among royal observers, constitutional scholars, and members of the public regarding both the fairness of the protocol and the broader question of the prince's role in the monarchy. In a series of interviews conducted during his stay in France, Prince Henrik articulated his grievances directly, stating that he did not feel properly recognized within the royal family, and that his precedence being placed after that of his son was unprecedented among European monarchies. He referenced his decades of service, his relinquishment of French citizenship, and his adaptation to Danish customs as evidence that his contributions merited a more prominent position. The interviews were widely reported in Danish and international press, sparking discussion about the rigidity of royal traditions and the challenges of integrating a foreign-born consort into a hereditary institution. The response from the Danish royal court was measured and focused on maintaining institutional stability. Queen Margrethe II issued a public statement expressing understanding of Prince Henrik's feelings while reiterating her respect for established protocol. Court officials consulted with legal advisors, reviewing historical precedents, and seeking input from other European royal households. While some commentators suggested that the situation might prompt changes to ceremonial procedures, official statements made clear that there would be no immediate alteration to the rules of precedence. Parliamentary records and cabinet minutes from the period reveal that the government treated the matter as an internal affair of the royal household, declining to intervene or to propose legislative amendments. The Danish public was divided in its reaction. Opinion polls conducted in the aftermath of the incident indicated both sympathy for the prince's sense of exclusion and support for upholding the traditions that had governed the monarchy for generations. After several weeks abroad, Prince Henrik returned to Denmark, resuming his public duties and participating in official events alongside Queen Margrethe II. Subsequent reporting noted that while ceremonial arrangements remained largely unchanged, there was a discernible effort by the royal household to recognize his contributions and reaffirm his dignity as consort. The incident, however, continued to be referenced in later discussions about the role of royal spouses, gender equality within the monarchy, and the modernization of institutional protocol. The precedence crisis of 2002 thus became a defining moment in Prince Henrik's public life. It underscored the complexities of royal hierarchy, the evolving expectations for consorts in modern constitutional monarchies, and the difficulties of balancing personal conviction with institutional constraint. The episode's lasting impact lay in its contribution to a broader conversation, within Denmark and beyond, about the rights, recognition, and responsibilities of those who marry into reigning royal families. The 1990 and early 2000 were marked by ongoing efforts within the Danish monarchy to adapt to the changing expectations of society and the evolving demands of constitutional monarchy. Prince Henrik, while navigating challenges of personal status, became increasingly active in discussions concerning modernization and succession. The era witnessed both subtle and public shifts in royal protocol, communication strategies, and internal family dynamics reflecting broader European trends toward transparency and flexibility in royal institutions. During this period, Prince Henrik supported initiatives aimed at aligning the monarchy with contemporary social values. He participated in consultations with Queen Margrethe II, royal advisors, and representatives of government ministries regarding public engagement, charitable partnerships, and the monarchy's visibility in Danish civic life. Royal press releases and speeches from this era reveal the introduction of new approaches to media relations, including greater access for journalists, expanded use of television broadcasts, and the establishment of regular press conferences with the royal couple. These measures were intended to reinforce the monarchy's relevance in a society characterized by rapid social and technological change. Succession planning became a focus of internal discussion as Crown Prince Frederik reached adulthood and assumed more prominent public responsibilities. Prince Henrik played a role in supporting his son's education and career development, advocating for opportunities that combined academic achievement with international experience. Crown Prince Frederik's studies at Aarhus University and subsequent training in the Danish military were complemented by periods of study and travel abroad, often with the encouragement and guidance of both parents. The emphasis on a broad, cosmopolitan education reflected the family's recognition of the importance of preparing future monarchs for a globalized world. The 2004 marriage of Crown Prince Frederik to Mary Donaldson, an Australian-born marketing executive, was a pivotal event for the royal family and the nation. The court undertook extensive preparations to integrate Mary into the institution, including language instruction, protocol briefings, and a program of official visits. Prince Henrik's experience as a foreign-born consort informed these efforts, and his public remarks at the time emphasized the value of cross-cultural understanding and adaptability. The successful integration of the new crown princess was widely viewed as a sign of the monarchy's ongoing capacity for renewal. Alongside these developments, Prince Henrik continued to advocate for reforms that would clarify and, where possible, modernize the roles and recognition of royal consorts. He maintained correspondence with colleagues in other European royal households, exchanging information about best practices and institutional innovations. While significant legal or constitutional changes regarding his own status were not enacted, there was an incremental evolution in ceremonial arrangements and public messaging that acknowledged the complexity and importance of the consort's position. Public perception of the royal family during this period was shaped by a combination of tradition and adaptation. Opinion polls and media commentary indicated sustained support for the monarchy, with particular approval for the family's engagement with contemporary issues such as education, the environment, and cultural heritage. The royal household's involvement in charitable work, especially in the context of humanitarian initiatives and scientific research, was regularly highlighted in official reports and annual reviews. Prince Henrik's own contributions to modernization were both symbolic and practical. He encouraged the use of Danish and French in official functions, promoted the participation of women and minorities in palace events, and supported partnerships with universities and research institutes. His role in these initiatives was documented in royal archives and referenced in interviews with staff and collaborators. By the close of the early 2000s, the Danish monarchy had implemented a range of measures intended to secure its place in a modern constitutional order. Prince Henrik's participation in these efforts reflected his enduring commitment to institutional vitality, as well as his recognition of the need for ongoing adaptation. The groundwork laid during this period would inform the monarchy's response to new challenges in the decades to follow, ensuring a measure of continuity even as the institution continued to evolve. The onset of the 2010 marked a period of change for Prince Henrik, as advancing age and health concerns increasingly limited his public activities. In official statements released by the Danish royal court, it was announced that the prince would gradually reduce his participation in state functions and ceremonial duties. These adjustments were framed as part of a broader process of generational transition within the royal family, with Crown Prince Frederik and Crown Princess Mary assuming greater visibility in national and international events. Records from palace staff and public calendars document a noticeable decline in Prince Henrik's engagements, beginning around 2015. Attendance at public ceremonies, official banquets, and charity events became less frequent, and appearances were often shorter in duration. The press noted that the prince continued to participate in certain key occasions, such as state visits and national holidays, but the pace and scale of his involvement diminished over time. Public statements from the Queen and royal officials acknowledged the shift, emphasizing the importance of health and family considerations in planning the prince's schedule. In September 2017, the royal court issued a further announcement detailing Prince Henrik's diagnosis with dementia. The statement, which was drafted in consultation with medical professionals and released with the approval of the royal family, described the prince's symptoms and outlined the adjustments that would be made to accommodate his condition. Media coverage of the diagnosis was respectful and factual, with Danish and international outlets providing background on dementia and its effects on public figures. The court stressed the family's commitment to privacy and dignity during the prince's illness. During this period, Prince Henrik divided his time between Fredensborg Palace in Denmark and the family's French estate, Château de Cayx. Official correspondence indicates that visits to France provided opportunities for rest and for maintaining ties to his homeland. The prince's withdrawal from active public life did not diminish his standing within the family. Photographs released by the royal household showed him participating in family gatherings, private celebrations, and moments of personal reflection. The reduction in official duties also meant that Prince Henrik's long-standing patronages and honorary positions were gradually transferred to other members of the royal family. Transition arrangements were made in consultation with charitable organizations and cultural institutions to ensure continuity. Official records note that many groups issued public messages of gratitude for the prince's years of service, highlighting his advocacy and personal engagement in their causes. Public reaction to the prince's declining health was marked by expressions of respect and appreciation for his decades of commitment to Denmark. Editorials and retrospective features appeared in major newspapers, tracing the arc of his life from his French origins through his years as consort and cultural advocate. Commentators reflected on the challenges he had faced as a foreign-born prince and on his impact as a modernizing influence within the Danish monarchy. Internally, the royal household adapted its operations to reflect the changing circumstances. Staff were reassigned, routines were adjusted, and senior officials took on expanded roles in managing the Queen's and Crown Prince's public engagements. The period also saw increased collaboration between the royal household and medical specialists to provide appropriate care for Prince Henrik, with protocols in place to balance privacy with public interest. By the close of the decade, Prince Henrik's presence in public life had become symbolic, rather than operational. His legacy was increasingly defined by past contributions. His work as a cultural ambassador, his literary and charitable endeavors, and his advocacy for recognition within the monarchy. The period of health decline and withdrawal from public duty marked the final stage of his active royal career, setting the conditions for the events and decisions that would follow in his last year. In August 2017, the Danish royal court made public Prince Henrik's decision to forego burial in the prepared royal tomb at Roskilde Cathedral, a choice that quickly became a subject of national and international attention. The official announcement was issued through palace press channels and stated clearly that the prince wished not to be interred beside Queen Margrethe II, breaking with centuries of dynastic precedent in Denmark. The statement referenced his long-standing dissatisfaction with his title and position as Prince Consort, a grievance that had been aired in interviews and public remarks over preceding decades. The decision was the result of extended reflection and private consultation within the royal family. Palace records and family correspondence revealed that discussions about burial arrangements had occurred intermittently for years, particularly after the completion of the twin sarcophagus designed for the Queen and her consort at Roskilde Cathedral. Prince Henrik's objections focused on the fact that, despite his decades of service, he had not been granted the title of King Consort or afforded parity with the Queen in matters of ceremonial status. The prince regarded the burial arrangement as a final and public expression of this inequality, and his refusal was intended to underscore his lifelong protest. The official communication from the royal court made clear that Queen Margrethe II respected her husband's wishes and that the family would honor his decision. The palace emphasized the personal nature of the matter and appealed for public understanding. Subsequent statements from royal officials reiterated that the Queen and her family remained united in their support for Prince Henrik, while also noting the unique historical significance of his choice. The Danish press reported the news with a tone of measured analysis, tracing the history of royal burials at Roskilde Cathedral and reviewing earlier statements from the prince regarding his position. Public response was varied, with commentary in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and online forums reflecting a range of views. Some observers saw the decision as an understandable assertion of individual dignity in the face of institutional tradition, while others expressed disappointment that personal dissatisfaction would interrupt a centuries-old royal custom. Constitutional experts and historians were invited to provide context, explaining the origins of royal burial practices and the evolving nature of consort roles in European monarchies. The episode was widely covered in international media, often as an example of the ongoing negotiation between tradition and personal agency within modern royal families. Inside the royal household, staff prepared for the eventual implementation of the prince's wishes, coordinating with cathedral authorities, funeral directors, and government offices to make necessary adjustments. Official documentation was updated to reflect the revised burial plan, and arrangements were made for the prince's remains to be divided, with a portion to be interred at Fredensborg Palace and the remainder to be scattered at sea, as he had requested. The logistics of these arrangements were recorded in royal archives and handled with the customary discretion and attention to protocol. The public disclosure of Prince Henrik's burial decision marked a significant chapter in the ongoing conversation about the role of royal consorts in Denmark. The choice to reject traditional burial arrangements was widely interpreted as the culmination of decades of debate regarding recognition, equality, and individual agency within the monarchy. While the immediate consequence was logistical and ceremonial, the broader implications were cultural and institutional, prompting renewed discussion of the relationship between personal conviction and public duty at the highest levels of the Danish state. In the months that followed, the royal family and the public alike adjusted to the knowledge that Prince Henrik's final wishes would set him apart from his predecessors, not only in life but in death. The stage was thus set for the final sequence of events that would conclude his public and private journey within Denmark's royal history. The announcement of Prince Henrik's burial decision prompted immediate and wide-ranging responses from Danish society, the international press, and official institutions. Within hours of the palace's statement, leading Danish newspapers published editorials and background articles tracing the history of royal burials at Roskilde Cathedral and analyzing the prince's grievances. Television news segments included commentary from royal historians, constitutional scholars, and representatives of civic organizations, offering factual perspectives on the legal and symbolic aspects of the decision. The debate centered on the tension between personal autonomy and institutional tradition, themes that had been present throughout Prince Henrik's tenure as consort. Officially, the Danish royal court reiterated its respect for Prince Henrik's wishes, with statements emphasizing the unity of the royal family and the personal character of the decision. Queen Margrethe II and Crown Prince Frederik both declined to issue further comments, directing inquiries to the palace's press office. In interviews, royal household officials described the internal discussions leading up to the announcement and confirmed that all arrangements were proceeding in accordance with the prince's directives. Government ministers were careful to avoid public criticism or praise, maintaining the constitutional separation between the state and the royal family's private affairs. Internationally, coverage of the decision was extensive. European news outlets, particularly in France and other monarchies, compared the episode to similar debates about the roles and recognition of royal spouses. Feature articles in prominent British, French, and German newspapers examined the evolution of royal consort titles and privileges, noting the Danish precedent's implications for other European dynasties. Interviews with former diplomats and royal commentators highlighted Prince Henrik's history of service, his literary achievements, and the unique character of his protest. Public reaction in Denmark was divided. Letters to the editor, online forum posts, and radio call-in programs revealed both support and criticism. Many expressed understanding for the prince's desire to assert his individuality after a lifetime of perceived secondary status, citing previous examples of his advocacy for modernization and gender equality within the monarchy. Others lamented the break with tradition, suggesting that personal dissatisfaction should not override centuries of established ceremonial practice. Polling by national media organizations indicated that while the majority respected the right of the royal family to make private decisions, a significant minority felt that the tradition of shared royal burial should be maintained. Institutional responses reflected the sensitivity of the situation. The bishopric responsible for Roskilde Cathedral issued a statement acknowledging the prince's decision and affirming its readiness to accommodate revised funeral plans. The Ministry of Culture confirmed that it would continue to support the monarchy in upholding Danish traditions, while noting that royal burial practices were ultimately a private matter. Representatives from historical societies and the Danish National Museum offered factual briefings to the press, underscoring the long history of monarchical adaptation in Denmark. In the weeks after the announcement, Danish media shifted focus to coverage of the practical aspects of the new burial plan, providing factual updates on logistical arrangements and the anticipated role of the public in the eventual funeral proceedings. Royal biographers published retrospective features on Prince Henrik's career, with particular attention to his contributions as a cultural ambassador and his advocacy for a modernized monarchy. The debate about tradition and autonomy continued in academic forums, editorial pages, and televised debates, but with an increasing emphasis on historical continuity rather than controversy. The official and public responses to Prince Henrik's burial decision reflected a national conversation about the monarchy's place in contemporary Denmark, a conversation shaped by fact, precedent, and the lived experiences of a royal consort who insisted on recognition in both life and death. These developments formed the immediate context for the final months of Prince Henrik's life, during which preparations for his passing and commemoration became a focus for both the royal household and the broader Danish public. Prince Henrik's declining health became increasingly apparent in the early months of 2018. On January 28th, the royal court announced that he had been hospitalized with a lung infection and had previously undergone surgery for a benign tumor. Updates from Rigshospitalet in Copenhagen indicated that his condition had stabilized but remained serious, prompting public concern and extensive media coverage. The court provided regular factual bulletins regarding his health, with Queen Margrethe II and Crown Prince Frederik visiting him frequently and making brief statements of gratitude for the public's expressions of support. As his condition worsened, Prince Henrik was moved from the hospital to Fredensborg Palace on February 13th, in accordance with his wishes to spend his final days at home. Family members gathered at the palace, and the royal court issued a statement the same evening confirming the prince's death at the age of 83. The announcement was formal, concise, and consistent, with the tone established throughout his public life. It noted his passing peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by those closest to him. Immediate reactions included condolence messages from heads of state, members of other European royal families, and representatives of civic and cultural institutions. Flags were lowered to half-staff at royal residences and government buildings across Denmark. Public mourning was organized with a period of lying in state at the chapel of Christiansborg Palace, where thousands of citizens paid their respects. Official records from the period document the logistical planning involved in the funeral arrangements, including coordination between palace officials, the Ministry of Justice, and ecclesiastical authorities. In accordance with Prince Henrik's explicit wishes, the funeral service was private, attended by the royal family and a small circle of close friends and dignitaries. Unlike previous royal funerals, there was no procession to Roskilde Cathedral, and the prince was not interred in the prepared sarcophagus beside Queen Margrethe II. Instead, his body was cremated, and the ashes divided. One half was scattered at sea, honoring his connection to maritime Denmark, while the other half was interred in the private gardens of Fredensborg Palace. These arrangements, unprecedented in Danish royal history, were carried out without ceremony, and the royal court released only a brief statement marking their completion. Media coverage in Denmark and abroad focused on the factual aspects of the funeral and the significance of Prince Henrik's final wishes. Commentators emphasized the respect shown by the royal family in carrying out his directives, the symbolism of the sea and the palace gardens, and the ways in which the prince's burial broke with centuries of custom. There was little controversy. The prevailing tone was one of measured reflection on a life characterized by both public service and personal conviction. During the official mourning period, retrospectives appeared in print and broadcast media, reviewing Prince Henrik's contributions as consort, diplomat, writer, and cultural advocate. Attention was given to his decades-long campaign for recognition and his efforts to modernize the role of the royal spouse. Statements from government officials, religious leaders, and representatives of the organizations he had patronized described his work in detail, emphasizing his commitment to Danish society and his efforts to foster Franco-Danish relations. The funeral and subsequent arrangements were documented in royal archives, press releases, and photographic records. These materials ensured that the circumstances of Prince Henrik's death and burial were preserved for future historical study, in keeping with the Danish monarchy's tradition of careful documentation and public transparency. With the conclusion of the funeral and the completion of all ceremonial duties, the royal family resumed its public responsibilities, and attention shifted to the long-term legacy of Prince Henrik's life and choices. The events of February 2018 became a reference point in discussions about the monarchy's ability to balance tradition with the personal agency of its members, reinforcing the unique place Prince Henrik occupies in the history of the Danish royal house. In the months and years following Prince Henrik's death, reflection on his legacy became a sustained topic within Danish society, the royal family, and the broader community of European monarchies. The funeral arrangements, which had diverged from centuries of royal precedent, continued to prompt factual analysis among historians, constitutional experts, and members of the press. This period was marked by formal commemorations, public retrospectives, and academic symposia evaluating the significance of the prince's life and the institutional consequences of his choices. Official statements from the Danish royal household highlighted Prince Henrik's decades of service, his influence in modernizing royal ceremonies, and his long-standing advocacy for recognition and equality within the monarchy. The royal court published selected archives documenting his patronage of the arts, his literary works, and his leadership in Franco-Danish cultural initiatives. These records provided factual evidence of a consort who had not only supported the reigning queen, but also contributed substantively to the intellectual and cultural life of Denmark. Historians and constitutional scholars analyze the implications of the burial decision for the future of Danish royal customs. Academic articles and public lectures focused on the intersection of personal autonomy and dynastic tradition, citing Prince Henrik's protest as a catalyst for renewed discussion of the roles and expectations placed on royal consorts. The event was compared to developments in other European monarchies, where questions of gender, equality, and institutional adaptation remained ongoing. In Denmark, debates about the modernization of royal protocol and the potential for constitutional reform continued, informed in part by the precedents established during Prince Henrik's lifetime. The public, too, participated in the assessment of the prince's legacy. Memorial events were held at institutions he had supported, and literary festivals featured readings of his poetry and memoirs. Media outlets produced documentaries and interview series focusing on his biography, his cultural contributions, and his relationship with Queen Margrethe II and the royal family. Public opinion surveys indicated that, over time, appreciation for his candor and advocacy increased, even among those who had once questioned his protests regarding status. Within the royal household, the distribution of Prince Henrik's former patronages and honorary positions was completed by 2019. His successors, primarily Crown Prince Frederik and Crown Princess Mary, adopted several of his roles, continuing established partnerships with charitable organizations and cultural institutions. The monarchy's communication strategy increasingly emphasized the collaborative nature of royal work and the importance of recognizing the contributions of all family members. This approach reflected lessons learned from Prince Henrik's career and reinforced the monarchy's image as an adaptable, forward-looking institution. Internationally, Prince Henrik's story has become a reference point in discussions about the evolution of monarchy in the 21st century. His life, marriage, and choices are cited in comparative studies of royal families and are referenced in debates about how hereditary institutions can maintain relevance while respecting the agency of their members. His insistence on the right to define his legacy, even in matters as symbolic as burial, remains a subject of analysis for royal commentators and historians alike. The years since 2018 have seen the Danish monarchy continue to evolve, drawing on the lessons of Prince Henrik's experience as it navigates the challenges of tradition, modernity, and public expectation. The prince's legacy, defined by both accomplishment and dissent, serves as an integral chapter in the ongoing history of Denmark's royal house and its place within European constitutional monarchy. Prince Henrik's decision to reject burial beside Queen Margrethe II brought long-standing questions about tradition, recognition, and the evolving identity of monarchy into public focus. His life and actions highlighted the complex dynamics between individual agency and institutional expectation, serving as a catalyst for debate within Denmark and other European monarchies. While some regarded his choices as controversial, others saw them as a necessary prompt for modernization and introspection. The impact of his career continues to be felt in the practices and perceptions of the Danish royal family, ensuring that his story remains a relevant chapter in the ongoing history of European royalty.